Production support for INFocus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A rainy spring in Indiana has led to some eye-popping figures. The Wabash River at New Harmony crested at its highest level in 70 years. Indianapolis broke its 1964 record for most rainfall in a day, and Monroe County's 10-plus inches of rain all helped lead to the wettest April in Indiana since 1895. Residents along Salt Creek between Monroe Lake and Bedford saw floodwaters rise as the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers released water from a nearly full Monroe reservoir. The persistent rain and slowly receding waters have delayed many farmers' planting schedules, raising concerns about the state's economy. Tonight, we'll talk about the impact this spring's storms will have on communities, the state, and the country as we put flooding in focus. And thanks for joining us for this edition of InFocus. I'm Stan Jastrzebski. If you have questions for one of our studio experts during tonight's program, please email them to us at infocus@indiana.edu or call us at 1-800-987-9848. After a month of record rainfall and the resulting floods, Hoosiers are trying to find silver linings among all those storm clouds. But this week's severe weather has only added insult to injury. As WTIU's Alex Roy reports, this year, spring cleaning means something entirely new.
This year's severe weather didn't start out with flooding. It began with windstorms, uprooting trees and smashing them into homes, including that of Bedford resident Carla Yother.
I'm sure my basement's flooded, and I've got a furnace and hot water heater down there, and then what you see on the top.
Throughout Yother's neighborhood, trees were uprooted, damaging homes and cars. In the days following the storm, water levels at the Monroe Reservoir rapidly rose, and residents from across Lawrence County began to see their homes and property consumed by floodwater.
This is Big Salt Creek that drains completely from Lake Monroe. At the dam at Lake Monroe, when they have to release water to keep the pool level stable, this is where the water comes down this channel right here and feeds into the East Fork of White River.
According to the Army Corps of Engineers, the system is designed to minimize flood damage by storing water caused by heavy rains until rivers and streams recede enough that releasing water into them from the reservoir will not overtop riverbanks.
Most everyone that lives along the river and the tributaries that feed into it are used to this flooding and all have made plans themselves to deal with the flooding, and they wait till the water goes down, they clean it up, get new furniture, replace drywall, replace the floors, and get ready for the next one.
While some people were concerned with how to clean up their homes, others like Bloomington resident Coy Timbrook were just trying to get to their homes.
We are way up on the hill, so we've got a beautiful view of our new lakefront property.
Timbrook has to canoe his family to and from their home. He says he's never seen the water this high.
My father-in-law built our place in 1976, and in 96 he canoed almost for 4 weeks, and that was when Brummets Creek was lower, and they actually have lifted it since then, but I believe this is the first time the lifted area has flooded.
Governor Mitch Daniels signed an emergency declaration last week for 34 counties across Indiana, which will allow state agencies to begin working with the Federal Emergency Management Agency to assess damage to public and private property. The persistent rain and slowly receding floodwaters could prove devastating for some farmers. Tim Shoemaker plants corn, soybeans, and wheat on his southern Jackson County farm, but it may be too late this year for him to get a longer season corn planted.
Typically, your higher yielding hybrids are in the longer season corn. Also, in a given year, we'll have short, medium, and long season corns. It helps to spread out the risk, but when you plant everything late and everything goes to the same maturity, it puts all your risk in one area.
According to a report released Monday by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Indiana had only planted 49% of its corn crop, while at the same time last year, 88% had been planted. Corn in Indiana is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and if production is hampered, it could have a profound impact on the state's economy. We'll discuss the effect of heavy spring rains on several segments of the Hoosier population as we put flooding in focus.
And joining me this evening is my co-host, Sarah Whitmire. Sarah, good evening. Who's your guest tonight?
Thanks, Dan. Tonight we'll be speaking with Dave Cable, and he's an operations manager with the Army Corps of Engineers. So that coming up in just a bit. Back to you, Stan.
Thanks, Sarah. Joining us here in the WTIU studios tonight, our Indiana Farm Bureau President, Don Vilwalk, National Weather Service hydrologist Al Shipe, and Indiana Department of Homeland Security Response and Recovery Director Arvin Copeland. Thanks to the three of you for being here. I want to start with a generic question. You heard Alex mention that the state has already filed one disaster reclamation form. I'm wondering if each of your agencies is going to be involved in some way with perhaps filing more with the rains and the flooding and the severe storms we've seen this week. Arvin, why don't we start with you on that? How does Homeland Security figure into trying to get federal money to help clean up after a storm like the ones we've seen?
Sure. Well, we also file for declarations, Stan. Two major declarations that we apply for. One is a major presidential declaration for public assistance. This involves governmental infrastructure, roads, bridges, culverts, things of that nature. The individual assistance, the major declaration, is for residents, their homes, and their belongings. So we have thresholds that we could certainly talk about, describe, but just to answer your question, we certainly are going to be applying for major declarations in both those areas.
Al, when it comes to getting evidence to say, look, Indiana needs money here, does it ever happen where a federal agency will come to the National Weather Service or to someone like you and say, can you give us numbers about what happened so that we can justify giving the money back to Indiana so these people can clean up after a large storm?
Homeland Security is on my, emailed me about 2 weeks ago for my monthly reports, which they always look forward to seeing, which I had to send out a preliminary copy saying it had to be revised. And in it I had graphics showing that some parts of Indiana in a 30-day period had over 22 inches of rain. We were on the northern fringe of a massive rain area that affected not only our area, but also the lower Ohio River, and of course you've seen in the Mississippi River. So it's just not us that's gotten this, it's a large section of the middle part of the country.
And Don, I'm assuming that a number of the farmers whom you serve have already come to you and said, hey, look, we need this help and we need it now. You heard from the gentleman who was in Jackson County who's having trouble planting his corn. I'm sure that's a story you've heard a number of times already this year.
It is. It's one that we've heard from farmers all across the state of Indiana. Of course, south of western Indiana with the majority of rivers coming together here with the Wabash River, the East and West Fork of the White River all coming together in this part of the state. We see more flooding, but I can tell you farmers are behind on planting all across the state. Here we are almost the 1st of June, and the numbers reflected in the surveys really are May 1st numbers typically.
Arvin, tell me a little bit about how the disaster declaration process works. I've never been quite clear if there's this sort of figurative pot of money that we start out a year with, and Indiana's already dipped into it once. Does it make it harder to ask for money a second time, especially when you've got people in Missouri who obviously have even more severe circumstances and are going to need the money perhaps even more than Hoosiers might need it?
Sure. There are certainly budget crunches all over, we know that, but everyone plays by the same rules, whether you're in Missouri or Indiana, and the thresholds are the same based on censuses. So short of going into what those thresholds are, there is no limit on how many times you can dip into it. If you meet that threshold, you have the opportunity to apply for that major declaration. And we have met that since 2008 approximately 6 times for major declarations. So here in Indiana, we've been quite busy, and my job and my mission is to get as much money back to the residents and to the state of Indiana as I can.